Okay, guys, I'm going to go ahead and just start recording myself just so that I can upload this later for anybody that misses. But um, essentially, we're going to kind of do our best with this not ideal format. And I think that the best way to do that is to introduce new content via either screen sharing or just Blackboard. But the main way, as you guys know, that I like go over new content is I'll kind of bring in a PowerPoint, and then I'll generally do a like demonstration. And obviously those two things are kind of oh, Lexi's here, perfect. Okay. So those two things are sort of like compromised at this point. But what I'm going to do is I am uploading any PowerPoints that I have with new information and like any handouts or whatever that I would normally just pass out to you in class. I am going to upload to Blackboard. So for the most part, you guys are generally familiar with Blackboard, yeah? Is there anybody, you can chime in on this at any point, but is there anybody that isn't super familiar with Blackboard? I think that like most of you guys probably have used it at some point, but anyway, it's fairly user friendly. I had not used it really since like college, my own college. So I was sort of getting used to it myself, but it is like fairly easy to navigate, and I tried to keep everything simple. So in a second, I will kind of screen share and just run through where you can find all like the content on the page and things like that. But one of the things that I wanted to go over was the sketchbooks. Okay, so I think that I've at least had a lot of you guys express that you sort of do enjoy the sketchbooks because you get to draw the world around you a little bit, draw what you decide instead of what I make you draw in class. And up until this point, you guys have all been doing fantastically with this. But I think that considering that I won't be able to really do evaluations unless you send me like, you know, millions of pages in your sketchbook, I am going to just kind of grade you based on what you've already shown to me. And then you can use the sketchbook to either do homework and work out ideas for like maybe a slightly larger drawing. But I realize that some of you, maybe the sketchbook is like one of the few items of paper that you have that you can work with. So I definitely don't want to make you guys use all of that that paper. So essentially, you don't have to worry too much about the sketchbooks. I'm just going to grade you on what you've already done, which I don't think any of you didn't do that. So so that was one thing I wanted to touch on first. And I think I'm still deciding, and I'd like your guys' input on this too, if you have any suggestions. But obviously, when we do completion of major projects, we do like a group critique, and I think that the best way that I'm going to have you guys like submit completed drawings, I think I'm going to have you guys just submit images onto like a discussion board on Blackboard. So we're going to kind of test this theory out, and I'll get to that in a minute or two. But I think that the best way is to just kind of post your images of whatever work you do into a discussion board, you know, either the night of or the morning that something is due. And that way everybody can kind of view it, and we can give you feedback. But I don't really think that this type of setting is conducive for like really long critiques. And so I think that for the most part, we'll be doing, maybe we'll do like a group critique here and there where it's like you, myself, and maybe like another student or two, and we'll just do small individual Zoom meetings rather than a large scale meeting like this, because I don't think it's really conducive to this format. So that'll kind of, and I'll give you more information. I'm still navigating this, obviously. So as that kind of firms up, I will type out everything in, you know, very clear written directions on that. But you don't have to worry about a big group critique yet, because obviously we have not been in the classroom. We haven't been doing anything that would require a large critique yet. So you'll have plenty of notice on that. And, you know, I think I'm just going to do my best to, you know, continue to teach you guys how to draw and hope that you're having a little bit of fun, because I know that this is a very strange time and none of us have experienced anything like this. So I definitely want to be flexible to not only the fact that you signed up for a studio class, and that's what you're expecting to get, but also that you guys have, a lot of you have just been uprooted from the dorms and, you know, brought back home months earlier than you ever expected. So I know that there's that aspect of it as well. But anyway, so I wanted to start off today by, I'm just going to do a screen share. I'd like to introduce just a bit of new content, and then assign a short homework. And I just want to test out and see how this works. But I wanted to open it up to you guys. Like, do you have any questions like about this class or suggestions about anything that you think would be helpful, or basically anything? I want to kind of open the floor up to you guys, because I know this is, I said it already, but it's a strange time. So if you have any suggestions, please just like chime in or, you know, shout them out, because
I have a question.
Yeah, what's up?
So for meetings and stuff like that, it won't be like all the way to 10:45, or we cut it down?
I think that I haven't quite decided. I mean, definitely today it won't go till 10:45, because I think we're still all getting our bearings, myself included. So no, for the most part, it'll be me introducing content, you guys asking any questions or anything you need to, and me assigning kind of homework. And as far as in class projects go, I haven't quite decided on that, because as you guys know, you know, it's normally we go into class, I set up a still life and you draw for most of the class, but that's sort of changed. So navigating that will be a little bit different, and it might be the kind of thing where I have you guys set up something, and then you know, maybe I stay on Zoom for like an hour and you guys are just allowed to like draw, and, you know, I'll chime in or individually crit you there. But I think that me arranging to talk to you guys one-on-one during class time, like during the 8 to 10:45 range, will probably be more the way that I'll go with this, rather than having everybody stay on a Zoom call. Because I've seen my fiance do it all week with her classes, and she's just like, it doesn't work too well to have that sort of format. So for now, it'll be like abbreviated classes, and then I'll check in with you guys individually. Does that sort of answer your question?
Yes.
Okay. And does anybody else like have any questions about this? I know this is all like very sort of up in the air, and I wanted to talk to you guys and get a feel for where you guys are at. So, you know, please, if you have anything that you want to mention, please do.
I think for like demonstrations, it would be really helpful if you like posted a video on Blackboard of you doing the demonstrations, because I think like, especially for me, when I'm trying to look at my small phone but also apply it to like my drawing, it won't really work.
Right. And that's a good point. So I don't think they're available to you yet, but I've spent a good part of the last week getting some demonstrations together and putting together videos. So like for the homework that I'm going to have you guys do tonight, which I, again, will get to in a minute or so, I basically broke down, it's like a 10 or 12 minute video that will be up. I think after this class, it will be available to you guys. But it is just a breakdown of the homework that I want you to do tonight. And again, it's fairly simple. It'll be due on Thursday, but yeah, so it's me doing it. I sped it up a little bit so you guys don't have to watch me drawing for like an hour. But I sped it up and then I narrated it a little bit over it just to explain exactly what I was doing. And I've done that several times. So I do have a couple of time lapses that will be going up, as well as some like slower videos where I'll narrate over it. and just kind of like explain my process. But yeah, I agree. I think the videos are very helpful. And I'll be definitely posting those, and there's the section on Blackboard for that, which I'll screen share with you guys in a second so that we can kind of look together. But yes, I definitely agree. And if you guys have any like specific questions, like if we get to homeworks or something and you're like, oh, I don't really understand this, then you can definitely like request that I do another one or give a little more explanation, because I'm definitely open to that. Let's see. Oh, Tyler. Does anybody know if your screen freezes? Tyler's wondering if she has to exit Zoom during class, and if she can get back in. I think
Yeah, the same link should work through the whole session.
Oh, thank you. Oh, perfect. Thank you, Elijah. So, so if you guys have any more questions as we go through this, and I'll definitely field more before we sign off. But I do want to see if I can share my screen with you guys, just to kind of walk you through where all the course content and everything is going to be. So, so I'll do that right now. Let's see. Oh, this is so weird. Let's see. Okay. Perfect. All right. Can you guys all, for the most part, see my screen? Okay.
Yep. Yep.
Okay. So where I'm putting everything on Blackboard is under the course content little icon on the left. So I'm assuming that your setup is probably fairly similar to mine on Blackboard. But when in doubt, just go to the course content page. And that's where I've organized everything. So the slideshows, that is going to be a PDF version of all of the PowerPoints that I do in class, and all of the like content, like informational stuff. That's where this is going to be. So if you click into it, I have a couple things. So we got the composition slideshow, which I'll go over today, tonal studies, and then this one, which will be available once we go over that stuff. So that's going to be in there. And what I'll probably ask you guys to do is when I'm introducing that content, I'll probably ask you to go in and just pull up the PDF of whatever I'm talking about, so you can at least follow along and flip through as if we were just like looking at it on the screen in class. And then under this one, I got helpful YouTube links. There's not much in there right now, but for those of you guys who are missing your blending stumps or maybe could use a couple more, I did find a really useful video on making a blending stump just out of like stuff you have around the house. So you guys can definitely take a look at that, and I'll continue to add to that as we go. And then assignments. So I did want to talk about this really quickly. So I have tried to date as much as I could, but the assignments page is essentially going to be any documents that I'm going to have go along. Like, so for this homework that you guys are going to do, I'll explain it after I go over it. But there's a document you'll need to look at, and then you'll need to post images of your homework along with maybe like 1 or 2 bullet points in a discussion board. So I've created a couple discussion boards where you guys can, basically you can just think of it as like a folder where you can just like drop your images and then write any responses that I ask you to do. So it's pretty simple, but like this is the link that'll bring you to the discussion board for the first assignment. So if you just click on that link and then you click on this first homework assignment, it'll take you to this thread where it opens up this prompt, and the prompt also has the attachment of the slideshow. So that's all right there. And if you have any issues, responding to this, or you can't find the prompt or anything like that, just let me know. I'm happy to do like a separate call and go over it with you. But for the most part, it's just going to be submitting homework via discussion boards so that you can include images. So that is, that's the assignment page, and I'll try to keep everything as clear and concise as I can because I don't want things to get too confusing. but that is where you'll find all of that. And then demo videos, already mentioned, I've got a couple down here, just of things that I've put together. So that's where you'll find those. If you ever need to pull them up for your own reference, or if you're just curious, you can go ahead and take a peek in there. And then the last folder is for those of you guys that either don't have video capability, can't be in class for some reason, but everybody wants to keep up. This is where I'll put, obviously there's nothing in here now, but this is where I will put all of the Zoom call recordings. So after this is done, I will stop the recording and upload it. And then that way you can watch it and browse through it, just to see what you missed. So that all being said, does anybody, like, real quick, have any questions about all of that? I know it's a lot of information. It's sort of a weird setup, but
I have a question. Sorry.
yeah, go ahead.
So everything, those 2 assignments are due this Thursday, correct?
Just one assignment is due Thursday, yeah, and I'll go over that. I'll go over that after I introduce like the composition slideshow, which I'll be doing in a second. But yeah, the assignments, if you go in the assignments folder, this is due 3/26.
So that's just one assignment? Oh, I thought it was 2 assignments.
Yeah, no. They're related, and once you click into them and read the little blurb that I've written, you'll see that one of them, this one is just a document, so you'll just have to read through that document and respond. And then this one's just a direct link to the homework board. So this is where you'll post your homework.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm trying to streamline this process a little bit because I know it's a lot of clicking, but I've dated and labeled everything. So hopefully it will just be a game of matching up, the titles and the dates. Does anybody else have any more questions?
Did you want us to still do homework on the 18 by 24 paper?
That's a good question. So if you guys have it, you guys expressed for the most part that a lot of you do have the supplies with you. If you don't, for some of you guys, I arranged to have them shipped, and you may or may not have those yet. But the short answer is, if you have it, I would like you to try to do it on that paper, but I realize that it's large, it might not be conducive to wherever you're staying. So I would say as long as you have like standard size letter paper or larger, so, just something like this, 8.5 by 11 or 8 by 10, to start, that would be fine. I'm kind of just like accepting whatever paper you guys have at this point, because I know that it's strange right now. But yeah, so if you have it, I'd like you to try to use it, but I'm not going to be a stickler about it or anything, because ultimately you guys are just going to be posting images and not like the real artwork, so won't matter too much. Does anybody else have any questions about this? Hopefully this will kind of, I'm hoping that this will sort of like ease the burden on you guys. I don't want to be super, strict about, things like paper size or material or anything, just because I know that everybody's in a different situation, and this is sort of unprecedented time. So if nobody has any more questions, what I'd like you guys to do is, I'm just going to go through this composition slideshow. Just really quickly, I will introduce the homework, and then I will just give you instructions on that. But so what I'd like you guys to do is, if you could go into the course content, and, well, actually, you know what? If I'm still sharing my screen, so you can either choose to pull up the PDF and follow along, or not. You can just watch me do it on the screen. That's fine too. But what I wanted to introduce today is this idea of composition. So composition, you guys have probably heard me talk about it a few times, but it's the overall arrangement and organization of the elements of your drawing on a 2D surface. So we've kind of talked about how thumbnailing can be a good way to experiment with possible compositions, or at least choose a few. Your viewfinder is a great tool as well. lots of things can help you get good composition, but one of the main things that will help you is knowing the principles of design and knowing what makes something on a page look interesting. Artists will use this, as I've mentioned before, utilize composition to like take the viewer on a journey through their work and keep them looking at the page longer, essentially. So the principles of design that you guys, you're going to be working with for homework, but also just should know, are unity and variety, focal point and emphasis, and visual balance and rhythm, which I'm going to go over in just a second. But essentially, unity is something, it asserts structure, and you'll know it when you see it, but it asserts structure and stability. It has the effect of gathering all of the parts that make up a work into a whole, and make it look like one like harmonious, complete piece. I think I put in here, yeah, another way to think of it is to imagine listening to a song first. First is the whole song, and then paying attention to the singer, instruments, all the parts that make it up. When a drawing has unity, the arrangement of the objects, whether they're different or similar, will keep it anchored on the page. So in other words, it will kind of keep it from falling apart. So this, when designing a still life, this is something that you guys will want to keep in mind for future homeworks and stuff, but keeping objects closer together is easier for our brains to read. So you can have space in between your objects. You can have like varying degrees of space or positioning, but generally when you're doing a still life, you'll notice like most of the objects are connected, even if just by a small piece. I will try to kind of keep them all as a unit. And then variety, of course, is the opposite, the counterpoint of unity, and it'll add interest. So if you have a lot of things that are similar or like in a composition, and then you add in some bit of variety. So whether that's like spacing out objects in between, adding a larger slash of black through a black and white composition or a smaller one, that's variety, and that is going to make your image automatically more dynamic. And that's something that artists strive for a lot is dynamism. Emphasis and focal point, they're similar, but essentially when you're emphasizing something, you are really making sure that your viewer looks at this piece of the composition. So you can do that by creating like visual like arrows to point to things, or certain things in a composition line up a certain way. It'll kind of guarantee that you are looking where the artist wants you to look, and some artists put a lot of thought into this. Focal point is the area or part of a composition that seizes and maintains the viewer's attention. So emphasis is what you do to get your subject to look at this focal point, and then focal point is the actual place that you want them to look. So balance and rhythm. So I've maybe talked about this a little bit, but not too much, but it will bring visual stability to a work of art. So pictorial balance refers to the distribution of visual weight of the elements in 2D work. And in parentheses, there are many ways to achieve this. And rhythm conveys a sense of orderly progression among the parts of the work. And I have examples of that I'll show you in just a second. So, so got a couple of examples of unity and variety here. So unity in this, you have a lot of elements that are the same. So you've got these like repeating flowers and these repeating relatively even like middle yellow pieces that kind of read as a set, as do like these very organized stems, or there seem to be like interwoven here. And you do have a sense of likeness in these figures here. So even though this one is a little bit smaller, they do look like they're part of like a set of people. You can gather that they are sort of a unit of their own. And then you do have sort of these repeating flowers that they are repeated through the composition. So that is like that likeness, that sameness is creating like another visual set. And then for variety, one thing that Rivera has done is he's got these figures on the ground kneeling in front, and then he's flipped it. So this like focal point of the image seems to be in here, and he's got this this figure flipped the other way actually. So we're not seeing their eyes of these three in the front, and we are seeing this figure's face, but they're sort of like denying us the ability to look on them because they have their eyes closed, but they're also facing front, which is different than obviously these in the front that are kneeling and facing away. So a little bit of variety there makes it more interesting because you do have that interaction between the figures. And he also changed the height, as I mentioned, of this middle figure. So even though they're set and they read as such, this little one in the middle kind of does create some instability and a little bit of change that makes it interesting. And yeah, so I think I went over all those points. So, so the next couple things that I have here are more unity and variety. So this is Fruit on a Stand by Kaya Bott, and I seem to bring his work into the class a lot. I don't know why, I think I just like it, but he does have, he's unified these, this image by grouping similarly sized and colored and shaped fruits together. So obviously they're all sort of grouped into sections, and he's got these middle sections of the smaller fruit in this sort of square or rectangular arrangement. So there's like a little bit of, you know, there's a lot of sameness, there's a lot of like repetition in here, but everything is just a tiny bit different, so that it's not just all oranges or all tomatoes or all blueberries or whatever. What else did I say about this? Oh, in the paper, so I said that one of the things that was a variable, like something that was varied, was the paper underneath, because most of these fruits or veggies are fairly warm, except for these middle ones, warm colors and kind of bright, and then they're contrasted by this paper that's underneath them, and it's sort of like a cooler bluish hue. So that's like a really interesting kind of juxtaposition there. But overall, he's mostly grouped these together based on their like sameness in their category. So, so that's one example. And then over here on the right, I've got Galatea of the Spheres, which is Dali. And what did I say about this one? Their spheres and their resemblance. It is a portrait of his wife, Dali's wife, but he's done it in like a really interesting way where he's created these like planetary sort of shapes to make the portrait, and then you can see some of the lines in between. They're pretty expressive that are showing her hair. But then you have this like middle point that really just recedes very, very deeply right around her mouth, which is like a really interesting thing. But obviously you have the similarity of the spheres and the planets, their coloring for the most part. But then their values do vary quite a bit. So you're getting these super, super dark values in some areas. But then you're like, oh, it actually makes sense because it's like sort of in her hair. So if she had dark hair, that makes sense. But you do have like a lot of elements of unity and variety in here. And then if you like look down at the bottom here, like I'm starting to see like other shapes in some of the spheres if you like connect them together, like some forms down here. I'm not exactly sure what they are, but just like an interesting to bring up. And then here's another example, like unity and variety. So this is Letty and her children. So in this portrait, it's a shot of this family. And one of the things that I noticed right off the bat was this center beam that's like literally dividing that composition right in half in sort of like a harsh way. But at the same time, there is some unity because they all seem to be touching in some way. So even if they're not physically touching, there is like overlap in all of their bodies. So they are all connected. And when they're not connected to each other, they're connected to the theme in some way. So whether by actually holding on to it or just being overlapped by it, all of these figures remain in contact with either each other or this like center beam, which is really interesting. And another thing that I noticed is that they all bear some sort of like resemblance. There's like a familial resemblance in there, so you can read them sort of as a set. They're all wearing fairly similar expressions, and they're all in various state of movement or inaction. But you definitely do read them as a set. And then this like variable of the center beam just dividing the composition straight down the middle is something really interesting. And then you kind of do get this visual balance. This side obviously has more figures, but this on the left is somewhat balanced by like the contrast over here, because you're getting this like atmospheric perspective back there. And then more rich values in here. So I'm reading it still as fairly balanced in terms of just like values, the darkness and lightness of the values. So, and then example of emphasis and focal point. So this is like a pretty clear one, but we're going to talk about it anyway. The artist is Gerard Fromagère, and this is a portrait of Jean-Paul Sartre. And the artist is presenting you with this image of this man in a coffee shop, and you're getting these really hot and warm colors behind him, and then this really striking piece of diagonal green that's cutting through diagonally through the composition. And diagonals, I think I mentioned this earlier, but if I didn't, here it is. Diagonals are inherently more dynamic in terms of page orientation than vertical or horizontal lines. So even though that last image, Letty and her children, was being bisected right down the middle with a vertical line, there is something much more dynamic about this image with this green slash, and then that contrast of the really hot colors, so like this really warm orange next to some really cool and like saturated greens and blues are interesting. It like almost creates like a little bit of vibration or something when you look at them together. But one thing I noticed too was in addition to like all of this brightness happening back here, it seems that the artist has actually really concentrated on those smaller planes and those smaller changes in the subject's face. So when you look at this side or either side of the composition, and I look at the table, I see these like large flat areas of color, more so, and it's like a little bit more planar. And then when we get to his face, it's much more specific in terms of sectioning off. So I thought that also kind of kept you looking a little bit longer than maybe you would have. The final thing I noticed is that he's placing objects, colors that are opposite of each other on the color wheel a lot next to one another. So you're seeing this really saturated red stripe in here right next to this green, and they're opposite on the color wheel, which does create some sort of an interaction when you look at them together. So that's something that also kind of catches your interest, but it's a really good example of emphasis. And then emphasis and focal point, this is Chuck Close. And more obviously, this is a really clear example of emphasis and focal point because you literally have all these like tiny little swatches of paint, and they are kind of pointing right to the center of the work. And so your focal point is right in between the eyes of Lucas, the sitter. And one thing I noticed was the color daubs that are happening, they seem to be further apart on the outer like edge. And then as they get closer to the sitter's like actual face, and especially like in between the eyes, they get smaller and more specific. And they actually are like creating little arrow points almost, pointing you exactly where you want to be. And you are also getting this like weird kind of halo effect that's happening behind the subject's head. So I think that that's also kind of interesting. You're getting this like weird almost I get a religious element from it, but that might be because I went to Catholic school. But either way, I think it's interesting. And the final thing, the lightest values on the page are right around the subject's eyes, like the head. So you're obviously having darker values on the outer edge, and then the lighter values, positioned right next to them are calling your attention right away, and kind of directing you exactly where the artist wants you to be. And then this is an example of horizontal balance. So the elements on the left and right side of the canvas are fairly evenly matched. So you do have these two figures pretty much evenly on the one or the other side of the canvas. And the composition, I said, introduces like a really strong diagonal too. So you're getting that sort of dynamic element. And you also are seeing kind of like similarities between the two figures in terms of this lady wearing sort of like a leopard print or animal print dress, and then the cat obviously having like that leopardy sort of pattern on the fur. So you are having this similarity. And you're even seeing like this is almost a line kind of, and even this gate here, but these are almost like directly bisecting the canvas vertically. So that's another interesting piece. But yeah, they're fairly similarly matched in terms of like, I guess, detail too. I mean, obviously the woman is a little bit larger, but there is like a lot of really intricate detail on the cat and on even the portrait of the cat. So that's interesting as well. And then you also are having that similarity of this like really intense gaze that's happening. So that's interesting as well. And then of course, one thing I didn't mention was the gray values in the background they're both like sort of neutral, but also harmonious, because you are finding at least a little bit of some of these grays either on or mixed into these two figures. So like I'm seeing that this background could be appearing in her like clavicle area a little bit, and even just in the color of her skin is like pretty gray. So that sort of harmony is there as well. And then vertical balance, it's similar to horizontal. And it's the type of balance where elements above and below the horizon line seem to be equal in weight, number, or emphasis. So even though the weight of, actually I wouldn't say the weight of, but you're seeing a lot more in terms of objects and subject matter on the bottom half of this canvas. And then you're seeing this sort of like weird more organic like drapery, sort of soft blowing thing. I'm not sure what this is, but it's super interesting. And it's a really nice visual contrast to a lot of these really hard edges that are happening down the bottom. So this seems to be some sort of like futuristic, like I read it as a futuristic type of city or something like that. And you're seeing a lot of these like hard edges. And then if you follow this, like if you follow these diagonal lines right up into this, whatever that structure is on the right, it softens, it twists, and it kind of like winds up this pole and kind of brings the viewer right out of the composition. But it does provide a really interesting contrast, because you're getting the softness of the material next to the hardness of those hard edges. And one other thing I noticed is that the artist was using a fairly limited palette as well. So you do have a lot of the same color, a lot of that harmony in here. And then one of the more saturated colors, if not the most, is this like orange that seems to be the beam of whatever this structure is. And that's repeated down here a little bit less so, but that is definitely making us want to look a little bit longer. So putting that in there was, I'm sure, a compositional decision to keep us looking at that page a little bit longer. Okay, and then we have rhythm and regular repetition. So these are pretty similar, and these two examples are really solid examples of them. But as humans, we sort of crave like regularity, predictability, and stability. So things like pattern or repetition are very kind of pleasing to us. I think I hear a lot of people say, well, like, I need everything to be end in an even number when I'm like counting things, or, that edge is not 90 degrees to that edge or something like that when they're lining stuff up on a desk. And I think that kind of speaks to just like our kind of cravings, like our visual cravings as humans. But so the first thing I said is regular, somewhat predictable rhythm is something that we crave. So we associate it with being stable and stability. And slight variations that add interest, like for example, in Dan Flavin's work here, this one green light in this repeated yellow light structure is a little bit of variation. It's like pretty safe, you know. We're like, okay, like it's varied, but it's okay, you know. I think it would be, I think it might be worse if for people that like predictability, if there were like 3 of these and it was like this one and they were perfectly spaced, and then the last one, you know, was like not the same, you know, space, and it wasn't the same number of light bulbs apart. I think that would kind of like mess with us a little bit. But repetitive patterns can lead the eye through the work and evoke a response in the viewer. And the easiest way to create rhythm in which the elements of the composition are duplicated, the easiest way to create rhythm in which elements of a composition are duplicated at orderly and or fixed intervals is regular repetition. So we're seeing, of course, like the regular repetition in the neon light structure. And another thing that I noted was that this sort of like mimics sunlight. So I think that like as humans, we're like, oh, that's like a warm light. It's like, it just, I can't even explain what it kind of does. I actually saw this piece in person a couple years ago, and it's like an overwhelmingly bright light. It is overwhelmingly yellow, almost to the point where it hurts your eyes. But it's strangely soothing, and I think it is because it mimics sunlight a little bit. And like I'm like a depressed house plant in the winter if I don't get enough sun. So I was like, I felt good about that when I went into that room. And then this is just a drawing essentially of Dan Flavin's work. It's an etching actually, I guess, but I just had a couple notes. The room was divided by a wall of lights, as you just saw. And one side was green lights with one yellow strip, and then the other side was yellow with one green strip. So that is like just enough variation, and but it's repeated, and it's a repeated similar variation. So it's reciprocal, in other words, and so it makes sense to us. So that's just like a really clear example of that. So all of those elements that I just went over are things that I would like you guys to look for when you are doing the homework. And then the next 2 sections that I'm just going to quickly run through are things that I'd also like you guys to look for when you're looking at these compositions and doing the homework. And you will find the next 2 probably more quickly because well, you'll see in a second. I use the examples that are pertinent, but so you guys may have heard of this. A triangular composition is used a lot in painting, especially like Renaissance painting, but and photography as well. But it's the classical tradition of composition used in paintings and photography, and it happened in the Renaissance, and it's essentially where they organize the elements of their piece into somewhat of like a triangular shape or composition or reading. And when they do that, like this triangle we perceive as like a structured, orderly shape, and it makes sense to us. It's got these hard edges and it tapers at the top, and for some reason like we make sense of that, and it's familiar. So a couple of notes I have on this Da Vinci is the satisfying symmetry of the sides and the stability it portrays makes the triangle the perfect vehicle for conveying clarity and harmony. So the triangle doesn't provide the ingredients for a particularly dynamic composition. So it's a solid composition. It's great. It can be used in a dynamic way, but traditionally it's not like super exciting in terms of like compositional, compositional, I don't know what the word is, but I think you guys get what I'm saying. And here's another example of it. So you can see like there's a stable composition there. You got the ground is flat, and you have these two angles, and they're sort of coming to a point up here, and it makes sense. And the few notes I have on it are animals are grouped in a roughly conical, cone-shaped position. The triangle's familiar shape conveys symmetry and familiarity to the viewer. And this is a harmonious composition. It makes sense. It's familiar. We've seen it. So, and then this is again the same thing. And you can kind of follow the triangle right through this. It's anchored by these bottom 2 points here, and it fills pretty much the whole composition, and it comes together. And it does create like a sense of connection between these two women. So there is like that connection point that is kind of unified by this triangle. And finally, the rule of thirds. So this is something that you guys may look for in some of the works that you'll be looking at for homework. But essentially, the rule of thirds is a technique, and you may be familiar with it or not, but it's employed in a 2D format of art making, specifically in photography and drawing or painting. And essentially, it says that if you were to use 9 boxes to evenly divide up a composition, like I have here in this Vermeer, the points where these boxes intersect, so 1 here, 2, 3, and 4, those are considered the ideal places to place your subject matter or things that you want to place emphasis on in your composition. And the reason for that is that it's not quite in the center, but it's not so close to the side that it's either forgotten or initially overlooked. And the few notes that I have on it were, by moving the focal point off center, it forces the viewer to move their eye around the page. And I said, if the artist chose to center the focal point or the subject, the viewer's eyes would lock onto the middle of the page, ignoring the rest of the image, which is probably true. If he had put this woman right in the middle, we wouldn't have looked at it quite as long, I don't think. And then this is just an explanation of the technique where you break it up into 9 equal boxes. And important elements within the composition should be placed on the lines or at their at their intersection points. So they can either be at the point of intersection or, roughly on the line. So you'll see that when you break up more images, a lot of artists adhere to this. And it just creates something more dynamic. And then this is the same thing here. This is Monet painting in his garden. And it's by Renoir. And it's the same thing. So I've just kind of highlighted these intersection points are good places. And you can see that he lined up his easel right with this second line. So he's kind of adhering to that, and his figure is over here, but not quite off the page. So artists typically try to vary each section of the composition so that it doesn't bore the viewer, which is important. So that's Monet in his garden. And then this is actually a Monet painting of the Studio Boat. And you can see that the same thing, I've kind of blocked off these sections where the points intersect. And you can see that he lined the Studio Boat up pretty much directly with it. But then he's created this really interesting shadow that also kind of follows along. So that is like another example. And finally, this is a Rembrandt that you guys may or may not have seen, the anatomy lesson of Nicholas Tulp. And the squares here are where Rembrandt wants to keep our attention. So this area right in here, he wants our attention to be there. And he's created like even a spotlight effect right on this cadaver and on the faces of these people observing this surgery. But they are far away enough from the edges of the painting that they don't get lost, except for like maybe this guy. He's pretty close, but he's not super important. It's more these guys in here, and then the book that they're looking at down here. So the book is positioned right here, but they are all looking for it. They're all looking at it rather. So even this body here is pointing directly to this book. So that's like a really interesting point to notice. So the notes I have is he's saved the areas of high contrast and saturated color for the focal points. So the areas where the most color are and the most highlight and shadow are right in here. And you can see that like clearly on these guys' faces. That's where sort of that saturation comes in. So that's the composition slideshow. So I'm going to explain what I would like you guys to do for homework real quick, and I will take any questions, and then I will let you guys go, and we will like reconvene at the same time and everything on Thursday. But what I would like you guys to do for homework is, I'm going to go right into the course content here and just bring it out. But the assignment is, I have connected a document, a PDF called the Golden Age Compositions to in the assignments folder. So the Golden Age of illustration was an age where a lot of really technically wonderful artists were working, or illustrators were working commercially. So people like Norman Rockwell, Maxfield Parrish, N.C. Wyeth, not Andrew Wyeth, but N.C. Wyeth, and Howard Pyle, etc. So all of these guys were working in illustration, and their work was commercial. So they had to make sure that whatever they were working on was the most dynamic composition it could be. Because if you think about it, a lot of these guys were working for magazines and or just billboards, like one-off advertisements. So whatever they drew for whatever product it was that they were trying to sell, or whatever story that they were illustrating, it had to be really interesting visually and hold the viewer's attention. So the result was that they became really, really excellent with composition. And so these are the guys you want to look at if you're learning composition, which is why I'm having you guys look. So the assignment is to go through this document. Oops, sorry, let me just go back here. So I'd like you to go through this document called the Golden Age Compositions, and choose 3 masterworks. And then once you've chosen 3 that you kind of like, you can either print them out or just drag and drop them onto your desktop. But what I want you guys to do is go into the Golden Age of Composition homework board, and then click on the discussion thread, and that'll just bring you right up to the assignment. So the assignment is to review the composition slideshow and watch my demo video titled Compositional Study. So it's just like a 12 or 13 minute video where I chose an image, and I am just kind of sketching through it. And as I'm going through it, I'm noticing all of these elements that they use that I probably wouldn't have noticed if I hadn't gone through and sketched it out. So I'd like you guys to kind of do the same thing and take notes of what you find. So like whatever you find out about the composition, whatever this artist has done to make it interesting and to keep you interested in it, I want you guys to just like write down a couple bullet points. And then you can post your images of your sketches right into this discussion thread, along with the bullet points and just the name and title of the work that you use, just so, you know, if your classmates want to view it, or if I'm going back and looking at it later, we all kind of know what you're working with. So again, I'm just gonna click back. So that's in so the first thing that I'd like you guys to do is to watch the compositional study video, and clicking on this should just bring you right to it. And there is audio, so do make sure you turn on your audio. And then just go back into the assignments, click on, this is just a link right to the discussion board, as I said. And then you can click into that link, and one more time, and then that's it. Does anybody have any questions? I know that's like a lot of information, but the assignment is fairly simple. So it doesn't require you to make like a copy exactly of the work or anything like that. If I had one, no, I think I got rid of them, but I did a couple just quick ones. And if there are figures in it, you don't have to get specific, but I just want you guys to kind of notice what they're doing and what they were doing right, because they did like so much that was so interesting.
So I have a question. So
Yeah.
you want this? I'm a little confused. So 3 sketches of what?
So 3 sketches of, so if you go into the composition, so sorry, if you go into course content and you go into assignments, this first document here, it says Golden Age Compositions. You just click on it and it brings up a document with all of these artworks in it by artists, and it's got the title right underneath. So you know who
you have to redraw those? Like
no, you don't have to draw them exactly. You can just do like little basic sketches. So like if I were to draw this one right here, I would just draw a couple shapes that looked like vaguely human, and then I would just kind of start to notice like what they were doing in terms of like, okay, they're using this pattern to keep us really interested. They're using the floor to show like depth or direction. Just, yeah, sort of like an analysis, like a chart. But if you're still confused on it, you can actually just go right into this demo video where I do exactly what I want you guys to do for homework. So it's you just click on that video. Does anybody have any other questions about that? Okay, so I think what I'm going to have you guys do is I'll have you do that for homework, and then we will check back in on Thursday. And I think that we'll kind of either talk about the homework a little bit, but I do have like a little more new content that I want to introduce and go over. And then next week, next Tuesday, we will like get back into you know, drawing from life, and whether that's, you know, you guys setting up like a small still life on a table at home or something else, like we'll talk about it. But I'm going to just kind of keep putting together helpful things for you and just like be responsive. So if you guys have any questions, you know, just know that I'm available. Okay, so if you guys don't have any more questions, then I will let you go. And if anything comes up in the meantime, you know, you can either like Zoom call me. I'm like available. I just have my computer out, so I'm pretty much available whenever. But you can either call or you can just email me, and you know, I'll get right back to you. But it's a pretty straightforward exercise, and I kind of just want to get everyone familiar with like, you know, submitting work and you know, just get a feel for the best way to go about this. So so yeah, if that's it, then I guess I will let you guys just go, and then we can touch base again on Thursday. Okay?
Okay.
All right, guys. All right. Well, everyone take care. I hope you all stay healthy in the meantime, and I will talk to you all soon, okay?
Thanks.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.